and I'll hand it over to Cam.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks a lot for having me tonight. Yeah, it's always great to stay connected with as many people as we can in these interesting times. Good to see some familiar faces there as well. Good to see you, Mark. I can recognise that face. So yeah, originally I was just going to talk about the ovens, but I thought instead, obviously it's not just the ovens that we fish. So I thought I'd basically enlarge it to the whole area we cover and cover all the species that we cover as well. We do things a little bit different. We're purely not just trout. Yeah, so we'll get into it. And yeah, just write down any questions and yeah, fire away whenever you want as well. So tonight we're going to talk about who we are, our area, why we love this area, our target species you like to use, trips and questions. It's a real goal that I want you. I don't want this to purely just be a plug for our guiding services. Far from it. I want you to get as much out of the talk as possible. So is everyone seeing that all right? Just a thumbs up. I just got your internet connection's unstable. So hopefully, yeah, good. So yeah, that's just that side stream there. I'll touch on the bushfires a bit later on. That stream there, to give you an idea, got burnt, but it's actually looking like that at the moment, just with a little bit different landscape around it. So yeah, about me first. So we like to think we're not your average fishing guides, being that we've got this extensive background in fisheries research, both Katie and I. After university, La Trobe in Wodonga, I worked for initially New South Wales Fisheries as a researcher out in Narrandera. So worked on a wide range of fish species, worked all over the Murray-Darling Basin, up and down the East Coast, basically purely freshwater stuff. But what got me into that line of work was just a love. I initially thought I was going to save the Murray River after growing up on it at Corowa, but fishing, I guess, fishing and growing up on the Murray fueled that initial interest in all things freshwater and what lived in there. I started fly fishing when I picked up a flyer for the first time when I was 10, and I know by the time I was 13, I was just completely consumed by it. So basically, all my other fishing took a bit of a back seat, and I was just really focused on fly fishing. And growing up in Corowa, being a cocky kid, I guess, in a lot of ways, I'd caught Murray cod every way possible, and even in a lot of ways we wouldn't be game to do it now. Like, I'll happily admit that was just where the fishery was at. And so I started fly fishing for cod, and yeah, a lot of early interest. My early interest was fueled by people like Rod Harrison writing the odd article here and there. So I just sort of started chasing cod and couldn't get flies or anything to do that. So I started tying my own flies very early on as well, for both trout and cod. Been guiding now for over 10 years. Our business, 7 years now, I think. This will be our 7th season, with the last for nearly 5 full time. So when I say full time, we still go back and do a bit of research work as well here and there. Katie, we actually met at Snobs Creek. She come down to do her PhD. I was working for Vic Fisheries at that stage. She come down to do the fieldwork for her PhD. I like to joke that I thought she looked good in waders, and one thing led to another. So that's where it all started. Now we're up near Myrtleford, living in the hills up here. So yeah, she studied marine biology at Sydney Uni, aquaculture in Asia, in Thailand. I've got to read all these. She's got way more than this, actually. I just look over to her as she smiles. And yeah, she's officially a doctor of fish, specifically Murray cod and carp, which is pretty cool. So yeah, she guides for us part-time as well. When not so much when she's just when she's needed either. We have a few clients that specifically ask for her. She's pretty handy out there. So yeah, we're based near Myrtleford. Basically we live near Myrtleford, but we're very close to that border area and do a lot of fishing up, basically within a 2-hour circle of here. We've literally got trout streams on our back door here, but generally our fishing's, a lot of our local fishing's within a half an hour. Like the Ovens are super close to us, and it's a great consistent fishery. But we also spend a lot of time drifting rivers like the Mitter and the Swampy up near Cancoban. We like to do remote area forward drive trips with clients when we can as well. And to be honest, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to catch more fish. Often it's just purely, it's as much about exploring some of these beautiful areas in the high country. Yeah, we have much the same with the Murray cod as well. Our closest cod fisheries, either the Kiwa or the Ovens, they're the same distance for us. But we also, obviously, growing up in Corowa, so just upstream of Lake Mulwala, I'd say probably half my cod fishing all up for the season spent over on Mulwala. It's as much because it is a great fishery. More Murray cod live there than probably anywhere else in the country. But that being, cod are challenging. We'll get into that later. But yeah, and a lot of time up around Cancoban as well. Basically, all these spots I fished in my youth are now where we guide. So yeah, while we love our area, just so many options up here. We can start the day fishing for trout, or doesn't matter what order we do it in. We can, could even be over at Lake Hume chasing carp. We love to go over and do that now, and then we can back it up with trout fishing or Murray cod fishing in the afternoon. A lot of the time we're only half an hour in between spots, so you can easily do a changeover at lunchtime if you feel like doing something different. We know that our area is very famous for the quality of its trout fishing, but there are so many more options up here, which I think now people are starting to really see the benefits of. We're a 12-month fishery where a lot of places generally are only there for the trout season, where we've got options all year round. Admittedly, it might be a bit cold, but there's still options. Probably what really, that stream there actually on the left is a classic example. It runs down off Mount Buffalo National Park, and I've actually a few times fished it. The water is pretty much as clear as the water as it is there with that gentleman fishing it. Yet the Ovens River is in flood, officially in flood, and quite high and dirty, and we're catching fish and seeing fish. So with a little bit of local knowledge, it's amazing that even in times where you just wouldn't consider going fishing yourself, we've still got these options. And yeah, it's just a little bit further away from Melbourne too. That extra hour and a half. So I know like a lot of local options for a Melbourne angler are places like the Stevenson, the Goulburn, and that obviously as well. I can guarantee you, hearing reports, I started guiding on the Goulburn when I lived down there for the fly fishing centre, and I owe the Goulburn River a lot. I learn a lot. It's still one of my favourite fisheries, and I go back and fish it every year. But it's amazing just to hear the stories from when everything opened up and everyone was shoulder to shoulder again on the Goulburn this past weekend. And I got out and about. I think I saw 2 other anglers in about an hour and a half circle drive, just checking on spots. So yeah, our target species, obviously brown and rainbow trout, Murray cod, and carp are huge. Carp are one of these fish that honestly they cop a bad rap, and it's understandable. But in all honesty, as a fly target and in the fisheries where we fish them, like it's literally flats fishing in fresh water. We really like to get over on Lake Hume and chase them at the right times of year. We've both been and done a fair bit of saltwater flats fishing, and the similarities are amazingly close. If you develop a skill set carp fishing, you can take it anywhere in the world in these flats fisheries. And to be honest, carp are in a lot of situations are more challenging than a fish like a bone fish. So we've literally, with our trout fishery, sorry, I'm just moving the screen here so I can see. Mark, nod your head if you recognise the guy in that photo. It's good. Yeah, good. The guy who's in that photo is actually listening tonight. That's good. So yeah, we've literally got, there's a stream here for every fly fisher, and it really shows to us we have a really good success rate with our beginners. I wish now, without sounding cocky, I wish now as a kid I went out with someone like myself now and had that ability to be on to fish straight away. And we can definitely do that around here. Yeah, so we've got like just a little background with our fishery. We've got Victoria's highest alpine meadow stream. So streams up the back of places like Falls Creek, which are on the Bogong High Plains. Super challenging fisheries, but some of the most beautiful spots you'll ever fish. Remote freestone streams like that one there that Mark's fishing. So areas that we like to forward drive into. And our like valley floor streams, like everyone's sort of familiar with names like the Ovens, the Midder, the Kiwa. Streams like that are in the floors of the valley, so not as high at altitude, but still get fed that beautiful cold water from up higher. Tailwaters, so for those that don't know what tailwaters are, so it's literally a river below a dam. So most people here are probably familiar with the Goulburn. We've got rivers like that up here, so the Midder below Dartmouth. The Kiwa's technically down in the valleys, technically a tailwater. It still gets cold water delivered to it when we're even when they're just running water down out of the dams up higher towards Falls Creek, out of the hydro dams. And obviously the Swampy Plain, which gets water from the Snowy scheme. Alpine lakes that we like to cover, Rocky Valley and Pretty Valley. Spent a lot more time back up there this year, just had a couple of good trips early on, and it just made me realise, you come and go from places for no real reason during your fishing, and I'd sort of neglected up around Falls a bit, and I'm not sure why. Yeah, you don't go up there and catch huge fish, but just the numbers of fish up there, and we really nailed the caddis hatches up there this year, and willing to eat quite a large dry fly. Super technical, it's just a stimulator, so it was good, easy fishing. So definitely keep that in mind for your own fishing as well. And larger lakes, one that really stands out for us is the pondage at Can Coburn. It's sort of been forgotten about a bit lately. It used to have probably the biggest brown trout in Australia in it for a long time, regularly producing 10-pounders. But the size is down, but I'd say now they seem to have, the fish stocks have definitely rebounded up there, and lock style fishing in particular in winter, it's been a really good option for us, so out of the boat. So yeah, just a map of the locations we like to cover. But yeah, it's basically so from Can Coburn all the way down to so over to the west here. That's the King. You'll even see there's a bit of an outlier there. We've got a dot up here near Albury, and that's because we've sort of found the trout fishing below the Humes, actually below Hume Dams, quite consistent again. It sort of fell away in the last drought, but there's definitely browns there to be caught, especially over winter, and those real big streamer style techniques. So we try to drift that with clients when we can as well, if someone's keen to come out on a cold day. And it doesn't close for the winter, so it's one of the, apart from going down Western Victoria, I'd say it's probably the only reliable trout fishing in Victoria in winter in a river environment. And yeah, all these other places I've already sort of rattled off. And yeah, as you know, don't have to tell you, being Victorians, we get an extra month down here compared to those poor guys in New South Wales. So yeah, we're lucky. Just a short video here.
Good. Yes! Woohoo! Well done, mate. Lovely work.
So yeah, that was actually, I'll tell you where that was. That was actually up the Narrial. The Narrial copped it really hard in the bushfires. I haven't been back up there and fished it since, but yeah, I'll try and cover the fires later on. It could even be a good one for the questions. So just some highlights now for our trout season and stuff for your own fishing. So early season, we're typically fishing small feeder streams that run into the larger rivers, and obviously the tailwaters as well, because they're generally at their lowest. They're going to be all season long. So because they're holding back irrigation flows, not so much the Kiwa, but definitely a river like the Midder below Dartmouth. So it's an awesome river to wade at those lower levels. November to April, basically everything's firing except maybe on the hottest days where you mightn't get good fishing on those valley floor streams. But it's, you know, we've got a similar pattern across the state, I guess, in a lot of ways. If anything, I'd say up here, our hatch-based fishing can be a bit stronger than other areas. So by that, so once October rolls around, we're starting to see our first mayflies. That big fella on my tips of my fingers there was a Kosciuszko dun. We typically, so they're our biggest ones. Anyone who's seen a Kosci dun hatch, it's one of the most exciting things you'll ever see. It's why we generally stay out probably later than what we should with our clients, just in a chance that hatch comes off. It's a very reliable hatch for us. Once we get about midway October through to mid-November, we see them again March, April as well. It's not the only hatch we get. We expect on the right, in all but the worst weather, we're going to see mayfly and then caddis and things hatching most days. Large terrestrial fishing, generally based around hoppers and cicadas through summer. And actually even this year, we still had a lot of hoppers around by a couple of weeks into April. Unfortunately, we couldn't do anything about it, but I can tell you, having a creek at our back door here, we had a lot of hoppers, and that's pretty typical for us. We love to cash in on that good hopper fishing, drifting clients down a river. It's pretty exciting fishing, throwing big hopper patterns at the banks. Streamer fishing early and late season, basically I like to do that on our bigger rivers, even the Kiewa. We see some of our best fish for the season throwing streamers. So anyone who's covered any of the big streamer stuff out of the States, it's really boomed over there. There's no reason why we can't, and we do it over here. Basically, you'll see your best fish of the season a lot of the time doing that. It's a bit like cod fishing in a lot of ways, trying to be more dedicated to it. And then our gates come early November, the gates into the remote sections of rivers open up. So if you've got a four-wheel drive vehicle, that you can really get away from it and experience some of the best country in Australia, just with a bit of four-wheel driving. It's quite amazing that you can look at this blue line on a map and think, oh, it's not going to take me long to get there, but you might be an hour and a half to get in there, but it's generally worth it. Basically, the fishing might not be better, but the locations make up for it. And generally uneducated fish as well. So I touched on it before. Don't put the rods away for winter is what we like to say to people. Winter lake fishing. So Cam McGregor I touched on before is a great option. Awesome little pub up there too. So if it gets freezing cold, you can duck back to the pub and just look at all of the size of the trout on the wall up there. But we also have been running trips a couple of seasons down to Victorian lakes. I remember why now I like Wendouree so much. I've been getting down there a couple of times each winter and drifting around there in the boat and other lakes down that way around Ballarat. And the Murray below Hume. So it's there's a lot of cod through that section of river as well, and golden perch. But that winter time, we're generally throwing streamers or nymphing some of the shallower runs for trout, and there is some dead set thumpers below Hume. If you catch yourself up in Albury, it can be worthwhile going out for a walk, because basically this river, the Murray, gets turned off for winter, and as long as you're upstream of the junction with the Kiewa, you've got nice low flows and you can wade a lot of it as well. And it's not really regarded as a trout fishery in a lot of ways, but at least by fisheries, so they don't close it.
Safe to say that is a fair lump of brown trout. Better stop fishing. The recce's going too well for that cracker.
So that was actually last year. Caught that fish 2 years in a row, about this time of the year. So Murray cod, I've touched on cod. They're a huge part. I won't even just say our business. They've been a massive part of our lives. So what we're seeing, I think, how do you say it? So we've been in a lot of ways very trout focused in Australia. And I think lately now we're starting to see the value of other species of fish, and that's both in saltwater and freshwater. Now, Murray cod are this fish, and they're hands down, they're probably our most challenging target in freshwater in Australia. Now, that's not so, and we've got a fishery that's recovered to the point now where we can seriously go out and target these fish and expect to catch them or expect to get hit up by them. Now, and super accessible. So obviously the locations I'm going to mention, plus you can add others like the Loddon, even the Yarra, for example. That's probably one of the coolest stories in fish in Australia. If anyone's heard, I'll let you do your own research, but basically it involved fish in drums carted over a mountain range into the Yarra River. So we don't know when you get hit by that initial fish, you don't know if it's a little one or it's a huge one because they all hit quite hard. And different types of water. We literally, as you'll see soon, we're literally pulling them out of streams now side by side with trout. And then we get over, the further west we go, generally the river gets more turbid and it's a different experience. I guess that cliche outback experience. So the clear water options we love to pursue because it's basic. A lot of the time it's very visual. A lot of the time you see the fish hit your fly in the clear water. And the fish are just stunning to look at. And on that, we can be fishing small creeks for them, all the way up to medium rivers on either on foot or drifting out of the raft. And then our larger rivers like the Murray, above and below Lake Hume, and our impoundment fisheries, so Mulwala, Eildon, we spend a lot of time at in winter, and up to Blowering Dam. I've been tying, I'll show some later probably when we do the question sections. I've got a few here, but yeah, cod flies is a big part of my life, and yeah, I tie a lot of cod flies to sell. Don't really advertise it because they keep me up late enough as it is, but if anyone needs flies, sing out. And then yeah, our cod location, so the furthest northish up there near Tumut's, Blowering Dam, it's one of those options for winter. You'll see Upper Murray there, back down in here, rivers that feed Hume, and in the furthest west we go, that's the Murray, downstream of Yarrawonga, includes Mulwala, and then obviously Eildon as well. So for those who don't know, cod season starts for all waters apart from Eildon and Blowering on the 1st of December and goes through till the end of August. Those smaller rivers, so basically the closer you are to proper trout territory or somewhere where if a river looks like you're not sure if you're fishing for cod or trout, generally those smaller rivers are going to fish best from December opening through till when we start to get our first cold weather, generally towards the end of April, early May. They do tend to shut down, and it's largely based on the populations of fish that are up there. And then Mulwala fish is great all season, different experiences, but basically the colder the weather, we're specifically chasing big fish, which we'll touch on later on. Winter is big fish time. Everyone sort of knows about the story Eildon, and you can see that definitely in the catches there, and that reflects basically the fishery from north to south in Australia. I'll touch on that later as well. And yeah, Eildon and Blowering have no closed season. If it's basically, they worked out that quite easily that all the fish in there, most of the fish were stockfish, and worked out that there's fish are breeding, but they're not recruiting. So there's no food in there for the little fish to live on. Anyone who shops at the Fly Fisher should recognise that guy's ugly mug in the top there. I just remember we're being recorded on YouTube. Sorry, Andrew. So yeah, cod season highlights. So basically a general day, if we're out there early enough, we're going to be fishing surface flies from the get-go. Once that sun's up, we're going to be switching to subsurface presentations, and then we're going to basically do the same again of an evening when we expect fish to come up and eat off the top. Now, it's a twofold thing. Fish seem often are keener to hit off the top for whatever reason when the conditions are right. But some days too, especially in the smaller rivers, we get and if you can time, if you get an overcast day, you can expect to see fish eat off the surface at any stage of the day. And generally larger flies, and this is reflected in my tying a lot, I think, too, compared to other cod fly ties. My flies are generally larger, and it probably reflects a bit of my lure fishing backgrounds as well back in the day. Well, obviously, they're always side by side, but generally I'm tying flies pretty much as big as our lures that we use. Don't think that they're necessarily hard to cast. We'll try and cover that later on. It's all about smart construction. And then, yeah, other species, golden perch are a definite option, or yellow belly, especially spring, early summer. And we've had some success targeting them on fly. That's probably a whole nother story. But that being said, all other times of the year, they're probably more frustrating than Murray cod ever will be. And they tend to become more of a bycatch species for us. This is a great picture that Katie got. Have a close look. It's not actually a barramundi. That's actually a Murray cod down at Mulwala. She managed to capture that photo. I've seen them do it a few times, but to actually capture the image when it was out of the water after it just eaten the fly was pretty cool. We still don't know if anyone else has got that pic yet, so I'm pretty proud she pulled that one off. So yeah, this whole Clearwater cod thing, you'll look at this river, you'll think, oh, that just looks like a big trout river. But that fish there come out of water like this, and it's getting more and more consistent for us as we learn these fish a lot more. The coolest thing with the fish out of this water is it's a fish that lives in a fast-running river environment. You're not going to find it in the faster current like a rainbow trout. That being said, this fish, compared to, say, an equivalent fish out of Lake Mulwala or river fish in general, pull a lot harder. And it's all to do with them basically being fitter, unlike the guy swinging off the rod. I think that's just the way I stretched it out. I look a bit larger than I should. I think I swear in this too, from memory. So that's on a 10 weight to give you some idea as well. Fishing quite heavy gear. Just trying to get me back in on that bank there.
Oh yeah. Gonna come over there. Yep.
Cam, that video is not really coming across that well.
Not?
So,
Righto, it's all right. We can pause it.
thanks.
Well, that's a shame. It's all good. Righto, so that looks all right now, Dave?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Cool. So I wanted to touch on a bit, specifically chasing big Murray cod. And I'll be honest, some fish here have been taken on lure, but why I picked this out, but that with all these fish, even when they ate a lure, I was convinced that every one of them would have eaten a fly. So we had shallow water, a lot of them in water less than a metre deep. We're generally fishing for these fish on fly with intermediate lines on 9 and 10 weights. So basically where I like to explain it to people now is, personally, I'm as confident with a fly rod chasing Murray cod of any size as what I ever was with a lure rod. And we can actually do things with a fly that you can't do with a lure, and especially those big swim baits. I was going to show you this later, but you look at that fly there. So that's about 220 mil of fly. Looks big and heavy, but it's not. It's actually really light and quite easy to cast with a basic casting stroke. So I just want you to realize that these fish now, so what happens is with the Murray cod, the reason we talked about before, and you see on social media too, that generally there's more big fish turning up in winter. No one used to fish for Murray cod in winter. Something changed. And what changed was anglers all over the country, didn't matter what rod they had in their hands, started to realize that these bigger fish are feeding through winter. The reason they're feeding through winter is because those smaller fish, once that first bit of cold weather hits, their metabolism slows right down. And they seem to live out the winter on their fat reserves. Now, these big fish need to maintain condition and they need to be ready to spawn come springtime. So they're going to keep feeding. Don't get me wrong, they don't feed like a queen fish on a bait ball up at Weeper. But they feed, when they feed, they do it. They'll often, if they can eat something big and get it over and done with so they don't have to feed for a few more days, that's what they're going to do. That's why these bigger lures, bigger flies are gaining more attention from these fish. Not only that, we're learning that these fish are more of a hunter than we thought. These fish out of Mulwala we're seeing, Eildon, the one common denominator is blowering. They're generally around bait schools. So a lot of the time we're finding them in Mulwala near where we know carp congregate, and they're shadowing these schools of bait. It's about being there. You might only get 1 or 2 bites for the day, but generally it's worth it. That fly there on the right's that big one I showed before. I'm going to try this video. Dave, I'll just be looking at you. Give me the thumbs down if it's not working. Okay. This is a guy that contacted me last year about getting some flies. This is out of Blowering.
Holy shit. Oh, check this thing out on fly. Second cod, 20 minutes. Oh, don't know if it's going to go a metre, but holy shit, it's going to go close. Oh, Cam, your flies. Fuck yes.
Sorry, language warning.
Oh, what a battle. What a beast. Second fish ever on fly.
So, yeah, as Clint said, his second ever fish, it ended up going, I think, 104. I wish it took me it was that quick for me to get my meter fish on fly. But that guy's is an extremely talented angler on cod and big impoundment cod. And he saw the value in fly before even really learning to fly fish. So it was extremely cool to be a part of that. Now, carp. So I touched on it before. These photos are all from Lake Hume. These fish as a fly target, knock them as much as you want. I'll defend them. Yeah, they're our number one pest fish. We've worked at least in the Murray-Darling Basin researching these fish. But as a fly rod target, you've only got to look to America now as well. They're becoming extremely popular. The reasons they're popular, it's sight fishing at its best. Like, you're not going to, you might fluke one blind dredging a fly like you would for a trout in a lake, but at the end of the day, this is pure sight fishing. Everything's visual. You're reacting to the fish's, how it behaves. They'll spook for no real reason some days, and then a lot of time you actually, after a while, you realise that fish knows you're there and you've been throwing every fly at it for the last half hour, but it just didn't swim off. It was just being a pain in the butt. So, yeah. And that being said, too, certain populations of carp are quite aggressive. And, yeah, everything that you want to go and do in a saltwater environment, minus coconut palms or something like that maybe. But, yeah, extremely cool fish to chase. Not so much a cool fish for our waterways, but by all means, get out there and give it a go. they're a great fish to chase. Now, equipment. I presume everyone here's got experience chasing trout, and anywhere you go in Australia already, the equipment up here is going to be fine for that. So yeah, from tiny 1, 2 weight rods, 3's personally the smallest rod I use. It's only because I find I use dry dropper a lot, and every now and again you encounter a bigger fish where it shouldn't be. So I like 3 weights. Just a little bit more grunt if I need it for either fishing bigger flies and things as well as the fish. But yeah, 6 weights typically as big as we go. We may go up to a 7 weight if we're throwing bigger streamers, and then we might be using sink tip lines at least. And then on the carp too, 6 to 8 weight outfits. Your trout fishing, the smaller stream you'll cover with like a 7-foot leader, and then the bigger ones 9 and 12-foot leaders. We don't typically need to go ridiculously long for our trout leaders. And yeah, cod 8 to 10 weights, floating and sinking line options. If you could only own one line for Murray cod, it'd be one of the aggressive style lines, something like it's in an intermediate sink tip, because that way you can even use a lot of the big surface flies with intermediates as well. Leaders, super, very not technical at all, half 50 or 60 pound, the other half 30 to 40 pound. The reason we fish heavy is it's a much for where you might hook a fish close to cover and it can easily rub you off. Anything lighter than 30 tends to lose a bit of punch in the rough terrain. And yeah, the total length of that lead is only going to be 1.5 meters. Now, just to cover the trips that we do, for all the species we mentioned, we offer guiding for those, or we can even combine something like cod or carp in the morning and trout in the afternoon, whatever order, or we can just go after something specifically for the day. Now, we like to do multi-day trips as well. We're upgrading the website at the moment, so if anyone jumps on there and gets excited about the accommodation, I've been upgrading for a while, but we're not offering accommodation anymore. Unfortunately, we just had to change that up. But we live in an area with as many places to stay as are local, so there's always good accommodation options. And we like to do that out of Cancoban as well. We might go higher up into the hills there one day and then fish, drift the Swampy the next day, or chase cod another day as well. Just keep that in mind. And then, drifting rivers for trout or cod, and then, winter lake trips for trout or cod. I know David's email covered April's podcast that Katie and I sat down and did. We got quite in depth there, actually. It took us a bit by surprise, but we're glad we did it. We've got some really good feedback. There's some other options there where we've sat down with people doing podcasts. There's been some fly life articles. Recently sat down with, actually, that was like recorded at 1 o'clock in the morning on the floor of John's cabin at Lake Mulwala. We were talking cod there. So there's been a few places where there's some more information out there if you wanted to check it out. And questions.
Great. Thanks, Cam. Okay. We had we got 56 participants at the moment. I think we had 58 at one point, which is great. So, if there's a lot of questions, I don't know, I'm just tempted just to throw it open. So unmute yourself. Everybody else just remain muted unless you've got a question. Or put your hand up. Just jump in.
Cam, Bill Jackson here from Red Tag. When you're chasing carp, what flies do you use for that?
A woolly bugger is really good in a lot of situations.
Oh, okay.
And it's just a good generalist pattern, and even something like a woolly worm. That being said, I find myself now, if I'm using a woolly bugger, it's generally an olive or a tan on about a size 8 hook. And I generally use those specifically in shallower water situations. And I tie them with a glass bead now instead of a bead head. And the reason for that is, and it's actually worked for us really well when we've had days we've mixed up on a river with carp. So like say middle of the day on a hot day when we don't expect the cod to be doing just much, we might go and chase carp for a bit. And in that situation, I found that you get a real neutral sink rate out of a glass bead on a fly, and works really well for trout as well. And you can almost hover that fly in front of a fish's face. And some days the carp are quite reluctant to eat, but you can often get them just to suck one of those in. A lot of the time though, Lake Hume, even the river, the lagoons along the Murray, places like that, Eildon's a classic as well. Pretty much bonefish pretty much a bonefish pattern fly works really well a lot of the time, and you can basically make it look like a shrimp fleeing away from in front of a fish. The big things is work out the direction the fish is traveling. You need the fish to find the fly. You never want to drag a fly past a fish or towards it. As soon as it looks like no fish expects to get chased by something on a size 8 hook and they're going to swim away. And that's just a good general rule in the saltwater as well.
I've got received a question via chat. Was that all right, Bill? Sorry, did that answer your question?
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Cam.
Just a chat question from Sam Cox. What are the signs of a feeding carp on the flats?
The fact that they're there in the first place is a really good one. I know it sounds silly, but they generally go in there to feed. A dead giveaway from a carp that's going to be really hard to hook is one that's just sitting still in the water and not moving around. It almost looks like they're in a trance. Often they'll congregate in groups and do that as well. Those fish are really hard to get to eat. And they're often the fish too that after a while you're like, that fish knows I'm here. So generally a fish that's moving around, they readily tail as well, making a commotion. Especially spring, if you get a big aggregation of fish in flooded vegetation, they'll often be in spawning mode, and you'll work that out after a while. But those fish are really hard to get to eat as well because, like us, they've got other things on their mind.
Okay, and I've got another one. What's the bag limit for cod and what's the legal length?
I haven't killed one since I was 18. How's that? But I'm pretty sure, so it's a slot limit now, and the fish has got to be 55 to 75 centimeters long, so fall within that slot. The reason that came in was actually based on some work. A lot of it was based on some work I did a fair while ago. But it was so the fish has got a chance to spawn at least once before it's potentially taken. And then the idea of protecting them over 75 centimeters is to protect our most important breeding fish. And 2 per day, 1 per day in rivers and maybe 2 in impoundments. I'd have to double check that, but it's something along those lines. Might be only 2 in possession. And
also a Murray cod, aggressive and territorial.
Both. And that's the 2 ways to get a fish to eat as well. So the obvious one is a fish is it's hungry and it wants to eat your fly. But the other one is too that you can potentially piss a fish off enough because it's so territorial that it's going to hit your fly. And you do it enough, you get a bit different a hit, or sometimes you might accidentally hook a fish on the outside of the face, and generally that's where a fish has swiped at something to get it out of its territory. That being said, you got to realise too that for whatever reason, a cod might not eat. Even a 40 centimetre fish might not eat for a week. And then the switch gets flicked and it wants to kill everything that moves within cooey of it. So some days they frustrate the absolute hell out of you, especially when you know that you're fishing, or I'm guiding people where I know more cod live than anywhere else I've ever been. But for whatever reason, those fish just don't want to feed on the day. They might often, though, that being said, they'll turn on in spurts for like 2-hour bursts during the day, or the twilight periods and into the night are often prime examples. And then other days you'll just get them on and off throughout the day. Back to that previous question, any fish over a metre has to be let go as well. Yeah. Well, that's covered in the 75. So.
And just a follow-up question, because I know a lot of us haven't caught one before. Are there spikes on their back, sort of similar to bream? Are they?
Yeah, you'll get dorsal spines. So on they got some pretty good spines on their dorsal fin. The biggest thing with the cod is something called cod thumb. So it becomes a bit of a badge of honor, or wear gloves so you don't get it. But even a small fish, you can put your, like, trying to support the fish's belly for your photo, and you give it that thumb grip in the mouth. Very abrasive teeth, and they easily take skin off your teeth. Yeah, I've still got a bit of bark off my hand from the last big fish I guided a fella onto. So be aware of that. It's funny, you don't really feel it when it happens, but yeah, you notice it the next week.
Sam had another question. Will trout cod ever be available as a sport fishing target?
So we've got a couple of lakes where they've been stocked and can be targeted back into. That's Kerford just out of Beechworth, and Samble, the little lake in Beechworth. It's sort of mixed how they're going up there, but it's a tough one. It's because the big thing with trout cod is they're super aggressive fish. We catch them as regularly as Murray cod, especially in a river like the Ovens or the Bidgie as well, where we get up there a fair bit, and the Murrumbidgee, sorry. And the thing with the trout cod is they're a lot more aggressive than a Murray cod. So say you go out and you're fishing for the day, you catch 6 fish, 3 or 4 are trout cod and 2 are Murray cod. I guarantee if we surveyed that electrofishing or something like that, we'd still get much more Murray cod than trout cod. So the big thing with them is we get this skewed result purely fishing for them, and people think there's a lot more of them than what there are, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. From the question about recreational stuff, it's tough because the rivers they're doing really well in, but everywhere else where there used to be heaps of them, there's not. So to say we can target them straight up, I think it's a bit premature at this stage. And if it does happen, it's going to be based on stocked fish, not wild fish. And there's a big difference in wild fish to stocked fish from a fisheries point of view.
Anybody else got questions?
Yeah, Bill, go on, sorry.
Barney?
Barney? I want to ask a question. Cam, the fires, I just wanted to know, some of the areas up there were fairly severely burnt. How are they sort of recuperating, particularly the rivers?
Yeah, pretty good. A lot that we thought we'd completely lost everything in, because we had some quite graphic fish kills. The Upper Murray was probably the most significant of those. We lost a lot of big cod, especially. As time's gone on, we've worked out that it's been quite localised. So we still have big areas up there where we've still got a really good fishery left. That being said, the water's still a bit dirty in a lot of places. I haven't yet had a chance to really get into spots and check them out properly, fishing them. We've still got a lot of... So the Ovens is a really good example. So at the moment, if you looked at the Ovens at, say, Myrtleford or anywhere downstream of the junction with the Buckland, you'd be like, oh, this river is terrible. It's really dirty after any rain. And that's because of the dirty water coming out of the Buckland. But once you get above there in the Ovens, it was never even impacted. And we've still got beautiful, clear water. The biggest thing at the moment is, I don't think, say, compared to when we've had really big fish kills in the past from, like, say, the 02, 03 fires, I think we might have lost more then to what we have now, to be honest. And I think our rivers are in a lot better shape this time around. I think it's just been, we haven't had the torrential downpours over widespread areas. If you haven't seen already, Katie and I did an article we were pretty happy with in Flystream, and we covered the impacts that we've already seen in our rivers, named everyone in there and what we expect to see. At this stage, all I'd say is just give them time to clear, and I anticipate good fishing. And trout especially have this amazing ability to recolonise quite quickly when you think they've all died.
Right, Barney?
Cam?
Yep.
Cam, Barney Stevens here from Red Tag.
You go, mate.
First of all, thank you, mate, for tonight.
No, not a worry.
I can't believe how generous you people are with giving away what some people in the past would have called pearls of wisdoms or secrets. So it's very much appreciated by all, the 50-odd people who've tuned in tonight. So on behalf of us and the people watching, thank you. My question is, though, fishing midstream in the oven somewhere, and I've done it a few times, right up to the Murray and then back up high. Large streamers are being targeted for larger trout far more frequently now. Is there a fly that's going to catch me at the top end of the pool and the bottom end of the pool, a trout and a cod on the same fly?
Potentially. The hard thing there is having a hook strong enough to stay on connected to a cod.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest downfall for me starting out as a kid. It haunts me to this day. I often talk about it. I still think about it. And what brought me undone, it's the biggest fish I've ever hooked on a fly rod, full stop. And all I got to see was it when it ate it, how wide it was across the back, and its tail as it turned, and then it handed me back a fly tied on a big streamer hook, which is all I could get then, and it was nearly perfectly straight. So modern hooks have come a long way. I don't know if you can see, where am I?
Yeah.
Not the best, but there's potential there. I'd still say if I was you, I'd fish upstream for cod if you thought it. Especially targeting timber and stuff like that. And then on the way down, I'd swing for a trout.
Okay. Thanks, Cam.
Tony?
That's all right.
Hi, Cam. Just on Lake Guy, how's that fishing? And also the two feeder streams that run into that, I think Fainter Creek, is it, and Rocky Valley Creek?
Yeah. I fished the two above it a bit. And to be honest, this season was an interesting one. It was, you go there one day and you wouldn't see a fish. You go there a week later and there was fish everywhere again. And that was kind of the pattern for this season.
Mm.
And when I touched on Rocky Valley Dam and Pretty Valley before, one of those days where I went there with a guy and there was just, it was just there's fish normally there and you couldn't see a fish for like an hour and a half. And then we're like, oh, we'll go up the top and have a look at the lakes. And that was exactly what instigated that move this year. And it become a bit of a typical pattern for me. I think the fish just move in and around a lot there. And the thing with Lake Guy, I've noticed seems to be getting drained more and more regularly, desilting too, which I don't think is doing the fish any favours. I think they're moving around a lot based on that. I think it's like any of those, like Can Coburn's a bit like it too on a bigger scale. If you can get it when it's filling, I think you're going to have a good day.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I've got a couple of other questions through chat. If carp are fishing off the surface, what method and flies are useful other than woolly buggers?
So this season on Lake Eildon, they were feeding on the surface just on what looked like scum. If you can time it right, there's a lot of terrestrial insects that they're actually feeding on. And it was actually a big Chernobyl ant, if anyone's familiar with that, on about a size 8 or 6 hook, big red and black foam thing. And they seem to suck that in quite well. I've caught them on hoppers as well. I think, like a lot of fish, if you can actually trick them and make them think that they've come across something a bit bigger or nice to eat than what they've been feeding on. The other one I've seen too, if you get those cottonwood trees and they feed on that for some reason, and then I've just caught them on trout flies with a white wing. I think it's as much about presentation. They're not really, you've got to be really spot on with it. They don't move far off their line to eat something on the top. You really need to intercept them. And the hardest thing when a carp eats a dry fly is they're not really designed to eat off the top. They're a filter feeder. And you really need to let them eat it. So if you imagine a trout in a still water environment and it just comes up and it's like slow motion, add another 1 or probably add another 2 seconds. So you really want that fish to come up. You watch them, they slurp it in. They almost pivot back, and then they turn down. You need to hit them when they turn down. That's probably the biggest trick with it.
And that's great, thank you. And another question, have you been up into the buffalo since the fires? How are the east and west buffalo looking, if you have?
I was up there yesterday. I didn't go up as high as the east and west. I was dagging around in the lake, checking some fly designs that I've tied up out. But I've had good intel from up there by a fella that lives at Abbey Yard. And all I can really say is I don't know from a fishing point of view yet, and I sort of take things with a grain of salt, reports, until I can go and do it myself. But the grass is getting greener and the river's getting clearer each time it rains, if that makes sense. That's about all the info I can give at this stage on it.
Right, thank you. So, any more? I think that might be it, Cam. Actually, I've got one question while you're here. I've always been a bit sort of baffled by these hook grips or mouth grips people use sometimes when they catch land cod.
I hate them.
Yeah. Always a net? Use a net?
So, yeah, I'll always have a landing net on hand if I can. And that being said, I'll often go out on foot by myself, not guiding, and I won't carry one. So in that situation, I'll happily grab a fish on the mouth. By all means, wear a glove if you've got one. And landing nets as well, the bigger the better. It makes sense when you're trying to jam a big fish in what used to be a big net, and all of a sudden it feels really small. So the bigger the landing net, the better. The reason I personally hate lip grips is because it encourages this kind of behaviour. And people just throw all the rules out the window. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a trout or a cod. You hang it up like that, you might as well hit it on the head. You've basically torn out all their internal organs. They won't die straight away. They're going to swim off fine. In the next couple of days, that's when they typically keel over. So, yeah, lip grips I personally don't like because of that. Just be a little bit set up. Because generally, when you're not set up is when you're going to catch a big fish, and wish you were set up.
Okay, I've got another question come through. Have you fished the Catherine River or Yarraboola?
Yeah, I used to live up there. So a lot. They've both had, like Yarraboola Creek has just been, it got hit, smashed hard by the fires. We don't know what it's looking like. As it was only ever really a good stream in wetter years. You used to have to go quite high up into the hills to find fish in a hotter summer. And yeah, same with the Catherine too. I can't really. The Cath's a really good one to walk into. But yeah, I fished the Catherine, the bottom end of the Catherine last season, but the Buffalo was more consistent, so we ended up there more. And then obviously we had the fires. So.
Okay. That's great. Well, it's 8:30. We still have a bit of time if anyone wants a quick question.
I thought while people are thinking of questions, I'll show these flies quickly. Just a good general rule is that we, for cod at least, I try a lot of flies for trout as well. I just thought I'd show you some cod stuff tonight. So smaller the water, the smaller the fly. Now, when I say that, a small fly for a Murray cod is still on a 2.0 hook. Now, if anyone's a tyer or has bought a fly called a bend back before, it's literally just what you do to the hook. You bend the shank of the hook in here down on an angle, and you get this amazingly snag-resistant fly. You asked before about trout and cod flies. I've had trout, browns eat this, and that's on a size 2.0 hook. So it can be done. And then to give you an idea, exact same fly pattern but 2.0 versus 6.0. Now, the first thing you think of is that thing's ridiculously heavy to cast. I touched on it before. The bulk of that fly is synthetic materials. The reason we like synthetics now is because they shed water when you pick them up to cast. So it's not that. I think anyone that starts off tying flies for cod, I used to do it as well. You got this idea, you got to cram as much natural material on a hook as possible. And before you know it, you've basically made something that's like a wet sock. By adopting synthetic materials, and I've got a lot of inspiration from the pike scene, you can create this illusion of bulk and with less materials, and you've got a fly that sheds water quite easily. That being said, you'll never completely replace natural materials. Something like that I call it a timber toad. It's based on a toad fly, which is very popular in the saltwater environment. So I've just added lead eyes. I think technically it should have another name, but it looks like that toad to me. And the idea of that fly is those lead eyes take it down. That rabbit tail kicks on the way down, pretty much hits the bottom, and then you rip it up again, and then it goes down. And with all these flies too, the fish are hitting them on the paws. So to me, that I'm imitating a crustacean really well with that fly, something like a yabby or a shrimp. Now, smaller rivers, sometimes bigger water too. Surface offerings are generally that smaller size as well. So 2.0 to 4.0 hooks. Most commercial fly ties in Australia, that's about the size cod fly you're going to get. And that's kind of where I feel I differ a lot. And that's because I'm typically fishing bigger water than a lot of other people as much as a smaller water. Now, surface offerings, this fly here, and this is where you got to know too that a lot of this modern streamer fishing and pike fishing has an inspiration, and that's lure fishing. And we're trying to do things with fly that we did with lures. Anyone who's seen surface lures will see that bib shape looks familiar. It's just not as wide as what you get on a surface lure. Now I combine that in an articulated fly. What's happened then?
It's all right. I've just unshared your PowerPoint so we can see.
Oh, okay.
Demonstrating those flies.
Penny's video.
Can you see that? Or am I up the top in that left corner? You can see it. It's all good. And yeah, so that fly there, 2 hooks, 4.0 and a 3.0 in the back, and it's got that articulated action combined with a rabbit tail and with the foam, and you get this fly affectionately called Cam's critter, and it walks across the top like a surface lure, but you can cast on a fly rod. And then you get your popper styles as well. So you got a popping head. That little guy, it's funny how I call them little guys. I know everyone's trout fisherman here, and it's a huge fly still. But yeah, 2.0 hook in the rear, and then you got a fly that sits down. So it's basically different actions. And then you can have a big popping head like that on a fly, or you can cut it in half, and then you get a fly that sits lower in the film and presents differently. And sometimes the fish want a fly that wakes more across the top, or they want that more aggressive bloop, bloop, bloop. And that's only a 6.0 in the bum there. What I've spent a lot of time on, and it's purely inspired by this swim bait fishing, and we're doing the same with fly now, is these big articulated flies. That one there has got a shank in the middle there, and you get a walk presentation, so that fly goes whack, whack, and then it'll turn almost and pause, and they hit it on the pause every time, those big fish. And we've watched them stalk these flies, and then you change something differently, or you pause it for a little bit longer and it just gets the better of them and they suck it in. Now, I'm not going to fish a fly that big on the ovens or some other small, like the Broken River, for example, or the Yarra. The reason is I don't expect real big fish there. and I'm generally fishing them in summer when they're eating a lot of smaller prey items. So the smaller flies definitely work better in that situation. And then the same fly design there is what that big one was based on, but just in a 2-hook configuration. That fly there, that's a real staple for us in Mulwala over summertime. And then once the weather cools down, we tend to pull out the bigger flies. Yeah, I just thought I'd show that. It's been a crazy evolution of flies and where it's got to now. And to be honest, 2 years ago, I was all about 10 weight rods, and now I find I'm using a 9 weight just as often. It doesn't sound much different, but when you're swinging off it all day, everything adds up. So yeah, I think something to keep in mind too, if you've got that saltwater rod that sits there, doesn't do much work in between trips, that you've got this awesome fish to go out and target, and you might go fishless on them, like it happens, but when you get one, it's all going to be worth it.
Great, thanks, Cam. I've had another question come through. How can you make trout flies more snag resistant other than with weed guards?
How you weight the fly is the biggest one. So if you can add weight to the fly, and basically dumbbell eyes in under the. So Kelly Gallop's got a very famous fly, affectionately called the Sex Dungeon. And if you peel back the deer hair, you'll see it's got dumbbell eyes, and they're on the underside of the hook. So whenever you put weight on the underside of a hook, just like I've done in that there, that's the way the hook's going to go down. Now, you can even do that too. You don't necessarily have to use dumbbell eyes. You can make out of mylar tubing's a really good one. There's another good trout fly streamer called a belly scratcher, and that's all they've done. They've added, I think it's mylar tubing there, and they've put their weight internal into the tubing. So then that fly is going to ride with the hook point up. The other way to do it, and I've got some requests for it now too, for trout flies, is basically making that pattern a bit smaller again, that bend back style. So that bend back style fly, we've gone, if anyone's seen a photo of Lake Mulwala, it's the most snag riddled place in the world, full stop. And that's why the cod do so well in there, combined with some other factors. But that fly there, which is very snag resistant, fish side by side all day with that bend back. That bend back didn't get snagged all day, and this guy still got snagged probably half a dozen times, and you're repetitively throwing it into the snags. And that's what I like to say to clients when they're cod fishing. If you're not getting snagged, you're not having a go, because that's where the fish live.
All right. It's about 8:40. Unless anyone's got another question, I'm probably going to wrap it up.
David?
Yeah.
Just on behalf of the Sunshine guys that have logged on tonight, thanks very much to Cameron for a great evening. It's been a great 5 or 6 weeks doing Zooming and for everyone to catch up, and it's just gone from strength to strength. And your evening is just another excellent night for us all to catch up and listen to someone new, someone different. So thanks, Cameron, and thanks to Red Tag for hosting this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. All right. Well, like I said, this is being recorded and we'll get it up on our YouTube channel at some point. I'd like to really thank Cam for his time tonight. It's been a fantastic presentation, really informative. And I really want to catch a Murray cod now. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, Eildon, Eildon's probably, we're on Eildon a lot these days, guiding as well as fishing ourselves. It's just going strength to strength. And from a winter point of view, yeah, don't get me wrong, it's cod fishing, and it can be challenging, but the rewards are there now. And we can easily adapt some of our current saltwater gear just with a new line or something like that. And you've got a great setup to chase cod there. So keep that in mind. And then obviously all the rivers, and before you know it, you'll start chasing cod as much as you chase trout. That's at least what's happened up here. So.
Well, I just noticed today that they stocked Albert Park Lake with cod as well. So
that's good. Hopefully they eat some of those yellow belly in there. They're out of control.
Great. And yep, thank you very much. Thanks on behalf coming from the Southern Club as well.
No, thanks very much for having us. And yeah, just urge anyone to. We touched on it before with the bushfires. Check out that article we did in Flystream. But at the same time, it's been a really hard hit up here for everyone this season. Obviously, with bushfires and now COVID. Yeah, if I don't know, if you were thinking about going somewhere fishing, it was just in the back of your mind, like somewhere like people know places like Cancoban and Corryong for a little bit more of an extended trip, or up this way. And even the areas that didn't necessarily burn, everyone just didn't have a summer of trade that they thought they were going to get, and now it's just been there's some real hard stories I'm hearing, especially lately. So I'm just anyone that can get up this way, definitely do it.
G'day, thanks, Cam. Barney Stevens from Red Tag here again. Thanks again, mate, on behalf of all who put this together tonight. But you are the person who did it, the presentation. David, thanks for hosting it tonight. With your amiable backer, who he popped in there at one stage or other. Given the fact that as soon as we can get out from being able to not stay overnight, I'm sure that you're going to get some people who will be more than interested to come up and see you up a little bit north. So once again, on behalf of Red Tag and Southern and Sunshine, thanks again.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Love it.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Cam. I'll let you know when it's all up.
No worries, mate. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.